Shalom. I'm Nama Rue, and this is my husband, Rabbi David Rue. And we're making these videos from Israel, where we live. It is the year 5781 on the Hebrew calendar.
The 7th of Av.
Today, this day. It's almost Tisha B'Av. We're not going to make this video about that, but I'll just say some great things could happen in the next day, and then we might not have to fast on Sunday. In fact, I was feeling very Shabbos-y all week, and I saw all kinds of signs that it was already Shabbos. Anyway, we're getting ready for Shabbos, but we're making this video to have a little informal conversation. I just told my husband that I'm going to ask him some ad hoc questions. First of all, when we tell stories related to the the weekly Torah portion, at one point I referred to them as folk stories because they're stories about our folk. But in like the English language, folk stories has a different connotation, which doesn't quite apply. So I stopped using the term folk stories. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Because the stories we're sharing are what?
Sipurei Hasidim is the classic thing, or Masei Tzadikim, the telling of the pious, literally Hasidim, people that are trying to draw closer to God in their actions and their deeds. The stories are supposed to be inspirational in one way or another, to make you, to enable you to do the things that you already know that you should be doing. In the introduction to Mesilas Yesharim, the Ramchal says that I'm not here to teach you anything new. I'm here to remind you of the things that you already know, hopefully in such a way that will enable you to be more careful in keeping Torah and mitzvahs and limud Torah and so on. So the idea of the stories isn't simply to tell a story. The story has to have illustrative content. It has to give you a deeper appreciation of something in the Torah and an ability to observe, to practice in a greater, more inspirational way. With Rabbi Yaakov Komanitsky, who is very famous for having stories to illustrate everything, one of his grandson's Rebbes said when he was going home for Pesach to ask your grandfather for some of his really great stories. Ask Zadie for some good stories. And when he, of course, fulfilled his Rebbe's request and asked Rabbi Yaakov over the Pesach vacation for some good stories, Rabbi Yaakov says, you can't just tell a story. There has to be something that's illustrating. There has to be something that's generating Yiras Shamayim with. You can't.
Like it has to be connected to something. You can't just come up with a story. It has to have a reason. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it has to do something. It not only has to have a reason, it has to do something. It has to have some operative principle.
Like don't do something unless you're making history.
You know.
Make memories.
The Dubno Magi tells a story that the Dubno Magi is famous for his stories. He tells a story that this Russian army officer is riding by and he sees an old broken down barn, and there are hundreds of targets on it, painted on it, and in the middle of the bullseye of every target there's a bullet hole. And he stops this poor Jewish farmer who's there working and says, this is incredible. Who is this? You don't want him. I said, what do you mean you don't want him? He hits the bullseye of every target. And the poor Jewish farmer says, no, you don't understand. It's Shepsel, the shoemaker's son. First he shoots, and then he draws the target. So the Maggid was saying, he was asked why he has the perfect story for everything. He said, I only bring up subjects where I have the perfect story. Although it's clearly not true, because he was famous for, there's a story about him that he comes to a village and someone before him has come and claimed to be the Dubno Maggid to speak on Shabbos, and after Motzi Shabbos, whoever speaks collects donations. The Rabbanim didn't normally speak on Shabbos. It's very rare. And he says something, he quotes something that the Dubno Maggid had said and published, and then he says something ridiculous, and the Dubno Maggid challenges, and he says, you're not the Dubno Maggid because I am, and so there's a thing, how are we going to know? So Dubno Maggid says, listen, the Maggid is famous that you can take any two things, no matter how unrelated they are, and he can connect them together. So take two random things, open to Sifrei Kodesh, whatever they are, doesn't matter what they are.
Holy books.
Put them in front of us, point to something on each page. He goes first, and we'll see who can do it. And of course, the first guy, he's challenged, and they the two completely unrelated things, and he can't say anything about it, can't figure out. They give it to the Dubno Maggid, and immediately he says a beautiful drasha, so they all know that he's the Dubno Maggid, not the other guy. There's another almost identical story. I have no idea whether these two stories are true, although they both could be. It's almost the same. He hears the person pretending to be the Dubno Maggid, repeating the Dubno Maggid's Torah, and then he goes off to something else horrible, and he walks out. He says, listen, he's asked, why? He said, the first part is mine, so I have to sit through it. The second part, whatever, I can leave. But the point of stories is that they really are supposed to illustrate something, not just be a cute thing that happened to someone.
Like draw conclusions and inspiration, learn about your roots
they can
in a way that you can continue to live your heritage. And I want to segue for a second. I like that we're talking about stories because we've been sharing a lot of stories. And I want to segue because we opened up by discussing, I said, I was calling them folk stories, but that in English has a different connotation, but we are talking about the stories of our folk, right? Well, you and I are also of our folk, and we are along a lineage, right? And we also have stories from our lives. And I just want to ask a couple questions about what you do as the chief of a rabbinic court in Los Angeles, and what are the most, what are the main types of cases that you deal with? You don't have to tell the stories, that could be for another video, but what are the main kinds of cases that you deal with?
I deal with the classic things. The classically based, it deals with monetary disputes. I've dealt with that. After that, classically that's 95% of what you do. Today,
90%?
95% of what you do, if not more.
Classically.
Second to that would be chalitza classically.
What's that?
It's if a man dies without heirs and he has a brother, his wife is supposed to marry one of his brothers or be released by a ceremony called chalitza. If you look like at the Pinchas based in the records of the Vilna Basin, which we have for about 100 years up to the Second World War, you'll see that they had many, many more chalitzas than divorces. And after that would be divorce, and extremely rarely, classically, would be conversions.
So divorce
Nowadays,
and conversions.
Divorce is the most common thing that the Beis Din deals with. Second to that is conversion. Third is monetary disputes. And very, very rarely do we do a chalitza. I mean, I think I've seen 5 in my lifetime or something like that. It's not a common occurrence.
So that's a lot of what you do as the head judge of a rabbinic court in Los Angeles, but also the rabbinic courts, like the ones they really they're all connected in a sense, and you end up becoming a resource or needing to work with other rabbinic authorities to get signatures on documents to make things, resolve them. Is that correct? Am I saying that right?
No.
Okay. How would you put it?
There are cases that are of such serious nature that they require some type of rabbinic consensus. And when those things occur, they are generally, historically, and today I believe also not handled within any one beis din, but as the Aruch HaShulchan says, it's a halach of 3, and we contact at least 2 other. It wouldn't be any beis din. It has to be Rabbanim Muvhakim, people that are world famous for their halachic abilities, that would agree to the psak.
So the ones that I've heard you talk about, besides conversions, are a lot about like agunot, like being able to release a woman from a marriage where her husband didn't give her the get, right, the divorce document. Is that?
Or was incapable or missing or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So you help resolve those, and I believe that you are international resource. People get referred to you from around the world for freeing agunot. Is that correct?
It's happened.
I'm so humble. I'm very proud that you do that, because I feel like you're saving Judaism when you do that. And the other thing is, a lot of people will contact you on a daily basis, not just with those problems, but just to find out, what can I do in my kitchen because of this kosher issue? Or how do I build my sukkah? Or I'm trying to prepare for Passover, right? Just halachic questions about everyday life as a Jew. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess that works well with, like, we're doing our videos about Shemitah. We're talking about the weekly parsha. You are giving over inspirational stories of our great rabbis, right?
If you say so.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom.